Welcome to Furious Driving, and well, today we're in another unique in this country vehicle. In fact, this one's almost unique in its homeland as well, because with one, maybe two of these things on the road in the UK, it's pretty rare here. This is a South African built Austin called an Apache, and you'd be forgiven for, first of all, having never heard of it before, and second of all, for thinking maybe it's a Dolomite or a Toledo if you were to see it from behind, and being absolutely mystified if you saw it from the front. But before we go any further, I was going to say a quick thank you for watching this video, but if you enjoy this, please do consider hitting subscribe and of course like, because the algorithm loves that. And now on with the video. So what is the Apache, I hear you ask, because you may not have heard of one before. Well, basically, it's an ADO 16, an Austin or Morris 1100 or 1300, with a bit of a makeover, but it's far more than that. Because towards the end of the 1960s, British Leyland were aware that the ADO 16 was coming to the end of its marketable life. It was mechanically still fresh and current and certainly more than capable of keeping up with the rivals, but aesthetically it was starting to show its age a little bit. So they commissioned Giovanni Micheletti, he of the many very exciting 1960s and 70s concept cars, to come up with a bit of a midlife refresh, something a bit interesting and different. And what he did was take the centre section, the bulk of the car, keep it exactly as it was to save on retooling costs, but significantly simplify the manufacturing process because they were quite complicated cars to put together. So save money in that respect, but then redesign the front and the rear of the car to give it a new face and a new aspect and a whole new look that completely changed its appearance and would fool buyers into thinking that it was a completely different car. Let's stop and take a quick look around the outside of this thing, because wow, you need to have a proper look at it. If I do clever stuff with a computer and block off the two ends of this car, what are you looking at here in the middle? It's very familiar, isn't it? Basically, it's an Austin 1100 or a Morris 1300, an ADO 16 Mark III. The doors, the windows, the roof, the A-post, sort of the C-post, it's all the standard stuff you know and love and recognise. However, these two front ends make the car look totally different. It looks like a Triumph product rather than an Austin product, really, especially when you look here at the back end, because all of this stuff is what was designed by Micheletti to improve, update, refresh the old car and take it into another decade of production, especially around the back end, where you can see these tail lights are lifted straight from the Triumph 2.5, as are the corner pieces of the bumpers. And driving behind this thing, you can easily be forgiven for mistaking it for a Stag. At the front, the Triumph theme continues because we've got this nice stainless trim all the way around the edge. Again, it's a bit like a Triumph Stag or a 2500, but we've got a different front end entirely thanks to the Austin crenellated grille, and of course these standard off-the-shelf, just almost square headlights. But these indicators are unique to the car. They have a Lucas part number, but Lucas know nothing about it anymore, and they're the only car to ever use it. Unique front bumper, and South Africa apparently insisted on having these little front reflectors like you'd find on the back, but in white. This, by the way, is the original South African number plate this car wore when it was living over there. So as we walk down the side, just to kind of emphasise this, the front wings are different, they're unique to the car, the bonnet is different and unique, the A-post, the glass is part of the old Austin, the C-post and the rear wing, one pressing, it's the same design of C-post but a different part because it's part of this rear wing. The glass is the same as the original and everything from back here is unique to this car, so it's the same but very different. So lifting the bonnet, things continue to be interesting and a little bit different from what you might be expecting. This is an A-series at first glance, but it's also not quite an A-series, it's almost an A-series plus. But again, not quite an A-series plus. Now the thing is, to build these cars in South Africa and get around the import regulations and the taxes and the duties and the tariffs and yada yada yada, they had to build 80% of the car by weight locally. So a lot of the heavy parts were manufactured over there. They bring in a lot of the basic pressings and the more complicated parts, but heavy stuff like the engine was built in South Africa. So this is a locally cast South African A-series. However, there are a few little changes. For example, the position of the oil filter. It's like on an A+, but it's at an angle. The carburettor is 1.5 inches now, and this is a 1275, but it breathes more easily through a bigger exhaust. And the owner of this particular car has actually changed this for a 1275 GT head with bigger valves and unleaded friendly. So this car is making even more power. We've no idea what this car is making, but it's a lot more than you'd expect. And so it's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Other stuff that they continued to make for the weight ratio of the car were the unique front and rear pressings for the front and rear wings, the grills, the boot and bonnet, that kind of thing, and the glass, which is of course another very heavy part, which is a good idea to make it locally anyway, save on the shipping cost if nothing else. In fact, adding to the ever-growing list of unusual things about this particular car, the locally made pressings in South Africa for the wings and things were actually pressed in a Nissan factory in Blackheath, just outside Johannesburg. So climbing aboard the Apache, it's a continued theme of similar but ever so slightly different. Okay, ignore the aftermarket steering wheel, that's not indicative of the rest of the car. Looking ahead of you, things look much the same as they would do if you were in a fairly well-spec'd 1300 here in Britain or Europe. But look behind you, we've got these unique red seats with a different fabric, a breathable vinyl almost, with this different pattern. So these are specially made or uniquely made South African spec seats, which match the door cards, which are also the same, in this particular case, red, with this breathable fabric. Bear in mind how hot it is in South Africa. They don't suffer with rust, but they do suffer with splits to the fabric and splits to the dash tops. Also, this particular car, when it was new, didn't have a heated rear screen because, well, if you're in 40 degrees of centigrade, you don't need that. But since coming to the UK in 1986, this has been added as an extra. Now, looking ahead of us inside the car, we have a really good tea shelf, ideal for a cup of tea, a small sticky bun of some kind, and an afternoon admiring the view. Beneath that we've got, well, it's quite a convincing fake wood. It's a vinyl covering over the metal or plastic dashboard, a good sized glove box. We've got blowers in the corners, and we've got a limited number of instruments. We've got a speedometer on the left which goes up to 160 kph on the outside because South Africa, and the mph is like the afterthought number on the inside for a change, going up to 100. To the right of that, temperature, fuel, a couple of warning lights, and beneath that we've got a lower shelf, a few little storage abutments, an aftermarket radio, and our heater and ventilation lurking beneath the dashboard. Stepping back, we've got the 4-speed gearbox, lift to reverse, and the usual handbrake. Up above, incredibly nice condition headlining as well. And behind us, the usual roomy rear seat you find in an 11 or 1300. So they built these things in South Africa from 1971 through to 1977. They also did a similar thing in Spain. No, they built the same car over there called the Alfie Victoria, that only ran it for 2 years, from 71 to 73, until the factory mysteriously caught fire. But the story of how this car came to be is quite interesting, because although British Leyland spent a lot of money designing this car with Micheletti's involvement, they built styling bucks and prototypes, or a prototype at one least, then decided not to go with it in the end. They sidelined it and shelved what would have been the ADO 22. Until the head of Leycor, which is the South African Leyland Corporation, happened to be visiting the UK, happened to see the styling buck of this thing in a warehouse, and said, we want that, that'll be perfect for South Africa. And so the styling exercise was saved and brought back into real life and created as a car. A unique car for South Africa. To drive though, mostly it's very much like driving it is really very much like driving an ADO 16, because we've got the floor-mounted 4-speed gearbox, we've got the hydroelastic suspension, similar brakes. Although this is a facelift one, and the gear linkage has been significantly improved. It's actually quite sharp and snappy getting into each gear on this particular car. And this car is actually a bit of an unfair show of what this car can be thanks to all the engine work, so it's making a bit more poke than standard. And it's worth noting that in South Africa they were very fond of a bigger engined car. 6 and 8 cylinders were very much the norm. If you look at the Ford offerings, which are the same body shells as European cars, but with V6s and V8s fitted to them. So British Leyland really had to stress the power credentials of their 4-cylinder to make it a palatable option for buyers in South Africa. So driving the car is really nice. It's lovely and smooth on that hydroelastic suspension. The brakes are confidence inspiring and the steering is sharp. And of course we've got nice opening quarter-light windows to add a bit more breeze in if you're somewhere warm, like South Africa. Now this is one of only 2 of these cars on the road here in the UK, and this is by far the nicer one. And there's 1, maybe 2 others lurking in sheds. Over in South Africa, we might be thinking they're very, very plentiful, having been a mainstay of the road for so many years. There's only about 5 or 6 left on the road, actually still driving. The hydroelastic suspension was improved to remove some of the bounciness of the old car, and combined with the improved gear linkage, it moves the AD016 package along just enough to feel like an evolution of that older car, and coupled with the bigger engine, it completes that package, and the modern styling looks sharp and, dare I say it, cooler, adding a bit of that Mark II Cortina glamour to the mix. There's even a 5-door hatchback variant being tested for the Australian market, which would have put British Leyland and Austin way ahead of the competition. Now I know we haven't pushed it to high speeds today, but it does feel a lot of fun and a lovely revvy engine, which is also very, very smooth. It's a lovely revvy engine, and it feels like a really stable platform as well. Because we all know the 1100 and the 1300 were great cars to drive in the first place. The little bit more power this 1275 has just gives it the extra pep it always needed. Incredibly, the AD022 lost out to the Allegro in 1973, and the Apache almost became one of motoring's great lost could-have-beens if it hadn't just been for that chance sighting in a warehouse. But things could have been so different for British Leyland. The 1970s became a hotbed of exciting medium-sized family cars, each one pushing new and better ideas and fresher and more interesting styling. And while the Allegro wasn't a bad car, it was, well, the Allegro, and it wasn't exactly sexy. And it fell behind also in the hatchback department because it looked like one despite not being one. And let's be honest, if you were choosing between a Mark I Escort in a fun metallic colour or a brown Allegro, or even worse for BL, a Mark I Golf, was it even a choice? The other thing we should consider is the Micheletti styling. This one out over an in-house proposal from ex-Ford designer Roy Haynes' team and borrows heavily from the Triumph Part Spin and Style Guide. Assuming the AD022 had been a success, and I would guess it would have outsold the Allegro's numbers, there's a good chance this could have been rebadged as a small Triumph, and when the BL brands began to be consolidated, perhaps it might have been Triumph who lasted into the 80s instead of Austin or even Rover. And then how things might have played out for the entire British motor industry. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this absolutely fascinating and virtually unique in this country British Leyland offering, which you almost certainly won't have seen before. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, as always, hit like and of course subscribe, and join us again next time driving something completely different.